Good morning. This is the 51st episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. Today I will provide an analysis of the assassination attempt on Trump. And I'm going to deal with three aspects: the crisis of the political system in the USA, the crisis of the Western Bloc as a whole, and the alternative for the Western Bloc. Now, the crisis of the political system in the USA has to do with how the system functions. You have to understand that the system is based on capitalist funding. A candidate who doesn't have hundreds of millions of dollars behind him, all of them are male candidates now, without that funding, you can't have a effective participation in the political system as a candidate, as a presidential candidate. So, who is funding this system? These are wealthy capitalists, and in some cases, candidates like Obama could mobilize small donations on a massive scale. He did it; it was possible. But in general, is the big money, and the capitalist class in the United States and in many very heavily developed capitalist countries, there are two sectors. One is the sector in the United States now that is built around the military industrial complex. These are companies who profit from war. They are funded by the tax system. They appropriate the taxes through their politicians. They design policies. In my book on Decolonizing the Mind, I dealt with the war in Iraq, how this war was prepared, organized by key figures from companies from the military industrial complex. And then the politicians, they execute those policies. The politicians, they don't invent the policy, they execute it. The policies are articulated by this capitalist class. That is how the system works in the USA. So it's called a democracy, but it is not. It's not government by the people, it's government by the capitalist class. Now, what happens now is there is a fundamental discussion within the US capitalist class about what's the direction that the USA should take. And you could compare it with a discussion in Nazi Germany in the 30s. When Hitler came to power, and before that, like in the USA, they use racism and anti-Semitism as a mobilizing force for the masses. But the policy, the articulation of the policy within Germany was done by companies from the capitalist class in the heavy industry. The heavy industry is the industry that produces the machines, the infrastructure, the railways, etc. These capitalists needed resources, minerals from Eastern Europe. Therefore, they needed to conquer and occupy Eastern Europe and draw from these resources. So the driving force behind Nazism was this sector within the capitalist class. And the war, the Nazi war, was a war against Eastern Europe, not primarily against France or the UK or the Netherlands, or so. It was Eastern Europe. I explained that in previous videos. And there was another segment within Nazi Germany which was formed by the capitalists of the consumer industry. They were anti-Nazis. They didn't want war. Now, compare that with the extreme right now, is the reverse. The extreme right in the USA and even in Europe wants protectionism, not expansionism. They don't want war. They don't need war. So the driving force behind extreme right in the US is not the military-industrial complex. It is protectionism and nationalism. So they are anti-war, but they do support the war in Gaza, in Palestine by the Zionists because of the Zionist lobby, not because of the economic interests of the USA and Europe. So within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, in the Republican Party there are large segments pro-Trump and there's a segment anti-Trump because of the military-industrial complex. But the Democratic Party is more or less dominated by the military-industrial complex. And they presented Trump and his racism and his xenophobia and to mobilize the liberal and progressive forces for the military-industrial complex. And many of the progressive in the US, they don't see that. They think that Trump is the bigger and the most important problem. But the most important problem is right now, is the military-industrial complex. And in their campaign, they compared Trump with Hitler, set up a hate campaign rather than the political discussion. Because if you have a political discussion, you have to explain your position on war in Ukraine, in Gaza, in mobilizing for war in East Asia, Taiwan. Those discussions are not being held. So you have discussion of the racism of Trump and creating a climate of hate that enables the assassination attempt that took place recently. Now, the dilemma for Biden is, with this assassination attempt, they can't continue with the hate campaign as they used to. And then within the Democratic Party, Biden has failed as a leader, but there's no credible replacement. So the Democratic camp is an utter chaos. And it looks as if they will lose the elections. But then the Republicans have their own problem because Trump is not a candidate of the military-industrial complex. He's an erratic politician, not consistent. And in the first term, they managed to surround him with neocons. And the neocons, they were successful. They blocked the dialogue that he started with North Korea. In this way, they prevented a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. So, and then they succeeded in enticing Trump almost to go on war with Iran by killing General Soleimani. And Trump tried to set up a dialogue with Putin and Russia, but it didn't work. And the different segments within the capitalist class in the USA are romantically thinking about the days that Nixon was able to split the socialist camp and split Russia and China from each other. But that doesn't work anymore. We live in a different era. So the second term for Trump will have big impacts in the world. First of all, he has to decide based on his experience in the first term what to do with the neocons and the military-industrial complex. He already, in his first term, said that NATO is not his priority. And he recently, or in his campaign, he said that the war in Ukraine could be stopped within 24 hours. Pick up the phone, talk to Putin, and settle the things. And obviously, he will continue his racist policy on immigration and focus on economic recovery. So, if Trump comes to power, the crisis of the Western Bloc will deepen because US is leading the Western Bloc. And a split between the US and the Western Bloc will have big impacts on geopolitics. There is an alternative developing for the Western Bloc, led by China and Russia, with the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India, a big nation, follows in this process but doesn't really lead it. Iran is a leading force in Western Asia, and I suspect that Iran, Russia, and China will take the lead in building the alternative for the Western Bloc. Now, you could download this PowerPoint on sandahira.com, and if you want to support this channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion group, and if you want to make a donation, go at sandahira.com to see how you can do that. Thank you, and hope to see you next time.